I don't know where. Hold on. I'm gonna get this super straight. I don't have all this. When you're broadcasting from your house, it's not like a studio.
Good. Okay. Okay. Good afternoon. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. My name is Lambert Mbom. I'm a freelance journalist based in Washington, D.C. It is Thanksgiving Day in the United States of America. And for many Christian communities in Africa, it is also a time of Thanksgiving. Many parishes in different communities are organizing Harvest Thanksgiving. You know, Gratitude, being grateful, is a basic human condition, and saying thank you is one of the first lessons parents teach their children. 2020 has been a very rough year, one marked by the lethal coronavirus pandemic. Many have died. In the United States alone, I think we have over 240,000 people who have lost their lives. Worldwide, the figures say 59 million people have been infected, 1.5 million have died. It is also an economic nightmare. Many cities, were shut down, and many again have coming up with shutdowns, closed that, whatever you call it. It is a healthcare scar. Everybody's afraid. But also there are social issues that are being highlighted now. You hear about homelessness. You hear about hunger. Hunger has become a great issue. Within the last couple of days in the United States, we have heard about people who are, you know, getting online in order to get food from the food pantries. And so there are many issues. And besides it, there's another great healthcare pandemic associated with coronavirus, which is the mental health part, which we are really not paying attention to. But the one good news from Africa is that it has not turned out to be the nightmare it was predicted to be. And believe it or not, while there are many reasons for this, and we pray this remains the same way, one other reason is because faithful citizens, like my dear friend and classmate Vickie Remoe from Sierra Leone, stepped up to the plate. You're going to hear the incredible work she did when coronavirus hit the continent of Africa, and what she did as a journalist, as a reporter, in order to get this to the attention of the community. But did not just do that, reporting. She also took on a second hat as an activist and got into action. But just before I get on with Vickie, I just wanted to say one thing about Thanksgiving. There's one thing to be grateful for. It is itself the ability to be grateful. That we can say thank you. That we can be grateful. That we can celebrate Thanksgiving is something we cannot and should not take for granted. And even beyond this, it is not just what we are thankful for or grateful for, it is also who we should be grateful for and thankful to. You know, take time today, quiet moment, just to list down the what and the who you are thankful for, what you are thankful for. So many people are going to say they are thankful for their parents, they are thankful for family, they are thankful for this, they are thankful for that, and that's great. But you should also be thankful for yourself. For example, if you have a job, be thankful for that. Don't take it for granted. Whatever you have, whatever or whoever you are, just be grateful for that. And because coronavirus the pandemic has forced all of us into ways and patterns of life that we were not used to, there is a term that is being bandied around now, reimagining oneself. We all have had to reimagine ourselves in one way or the other. And so, in the face of the stupendous challenges, exacerbated by COVID-19, when I look around, one person that I want to be grateful for is a classmate of mine, a friend, Vickie Remoe. I found an example in him. He's an American, a Sierra Leonean, an African, a journalist, and she wears many hats. One of the things I found, if you go onto her Instagram profile, she says she is in the business of nation branding as a TV host of the Vickie Remoe show. She is a publisher of Sweet Salon, active citizen, and host of Make Sierra Leone Famous. That's a podcast. But I don't want to say much about her. You know, I really just want to appreciate Vickie and say thank you for coming on. Thank you for offering me your time. I know it's not easy. Sierra Leone is far away. I mean, Africa has its many challenges, but then you graciously accepted to come on today to share the trove of experience you have amassed. We last separate, I mean, we last met in 2012 when we were in the Columbia Journalism School, and I've
Yeah.
only followed you on Facebook and seen the many things that you have done. And so, Vickie, thank you. And maybe you have some opening words before I start asking you the many things I have to
Oh,
ask.
Lambert, thank you so much for having me on the show. I can't believe it's been like 8 years since we graduated from Columbia Journalism School. And of course, you were always kind and warm. And, there weren't a lot of Africans at the J school. So we all, we are like, hey, me, you, and Mohammed Ademo, like,
Right.
so no, I always think of you guys as my brothers. I mean, I corresponded with him recently as well. No, thank you so much for having me on. Whenever I can find time to talk to a fellow J School alum, and it just warms my heart because we know the struggle.
Right.
So thank you for having me.
Yeah, so let me start off from there, J School. I mean, we all graduated in May, and with all the excitement, having a master's degree from the best journalism school in the
Charlie,
world.
the
Right,
best
right.
in the world.
Yeah, and everybody's like, okay, now we have a degree.
You've
What
done it
next?
somewhat.
What, and so while you are an American citizen, you would have, I mean, I'm sure, found it.
I'm not
Oh,
actually. No, actually, I'm not actually an
I don't know
American.
why I don't know
I
why I
know,
always think so.
because I did live in the US for a really long time, and everyone in my family is actually an American citizen. I'm the only person in my family who didn't naturalize. And the reason, it was just a choice. I just felt like I didn't need to naturalize to live my life to the fullest. So I had the opportunity to naturalize, but I opted not to. My dad naturalized. I have 5 brothers. They all naturalized and they're all citizens. And I'm still like, no, Sierra Leone passports. I will struggle with it. So no, I never naturalized, but I am a permanent resident. I do have a green card, and my son is an American citizen. So yeah, I think that journalism is a very interesting profession in the sense that, especially when you're in journalism school in the US and at Columbia, it really is a bubble. And in New York City, there is a very unique experience to being a reporter on a beat in New York City that I do not think can be replicated anywhere else. It just does not exist. And also when you are in the city and you tell, when you're reporting and you're like, oh, I'm from Columbia, that in itself also opens doors and opportunities while you're in the city, because it's like, oh, you from Columbia? Oh, okay. Y'all own half of Manhattan. So like nobody's going to ignore you. But the reality is that once you do leave journalism school, so there are several tracks. I feel like there's that 1% of the graduating class that goes on to the ABCs, the NBCs, CBS. Like a lot of our friends have done Fox. A lot of our friends have gone into national news, local news, and I see them and I connect with them often. But that wasn't a path that I really wanted to take when I went to the journalism school. It wasn't what I wanted. I went to the journalism school because I wanted to hone my storytelling skills. I had already done broadcast in Sierra Leone, but just broadcast kind of that I grew into, but with no training. And I really wanted to learn, the technical aspects of storytelling, the technical aspects of production and producing, which I knew that if I didn't go to school, I wouldn't learn them as quickly as I did. So for me, it was always a question. It was like, okay, now that I've gone to the J school, how do I translate this to the African context? Now, there are maybe 3 countries, I believe, where media and journalism on the continent is really top notch: South Africa, Kenya, and Egypt. Again, that's in my opinion. Um, Everywhere else, I feel like journalism as a profession is either too dangerous or very poorly compensated, or just not, it just, you can't really practice journalism, the kind of journalism that we were trained for in Colombia, which is like a very high standard. um and also you need laws and protection really to be able to practice the kind of journalism that we were trained to do, where it really is driven by ethics, and a really found grounding in fairness. And I don't feel like African countries in general have the level of openness that and protection for the media and protection for journalists, that is required to practice at this level. So what ends up happening for a lot of Africans who go to the J school is you come out and you kind of go into like freelance production, like video production, where you're producing stories. Maybe if you're lucky, you become a stringer for CNN Africa, or you string for BBC Africa. But the streams are the opportunities are just very, very, very small. A lot of us also end up kind of creating our own outlets, our own news outlets. Either you were already doing that before you went to graduate school, or after you come out of graduate school, you decide to start doing reporting for your country, right? Doing digital reporting for your country and creating a platform for news. But you also learn very quickly that it's not financially sustainable. And so then the question is like, okay, yeah, I'd really like to do this kind of reporting, but there's no money for that. There's no funding for that. And so a lot of those projects also don't go very far. Like you might do it a couple years, but then after a while, you're just like, there really is no financial gain. And then if you're still in the diaspora, there's that disconnect as well between being an African journalist in the diaspora, trying to cover home when you're not at home. You know, it's like, it's, yeah.
That's interesting, Vickie. I mean, two things you said. I'm surprised you did not mention Nigeria and Ghana.
Nigeria is actually one of the most unsafe places for journalists in the world. They have the highest, like, more journalists have died in Nigeria than anywhere else that I can think about, on the continent, and especially in West Africa. It is not safe to be a journalist in Nigeria at all. So I don't really, what I see happening a lot in Nigeria is a lot of Nigerian Americans or British Nigerians coming back home and producing content, etc., etc. But in terms of like breakthrough, or like, I feel like Nigeria is, when I think of journalism, I don't see the stories coming out of Nigeria in that way. What you see is a lot of national broadcast content, a lot of editorializing, which isn't bad. It's just that the market again has limits. In Ghana, yeah, even in Ghana, like I feel like it's more media and less journalism. I don't know how to explain it. Like it's more broadcast media, but not, again, we're talking about J school kind of level, right? So
Yeah.
we're talking about like here. So that's the scale that I'm measuring on, right? And you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? And yes, Ghana has a very developed media landscape, and especially, I would say, especially radio. Radio in Ghana is just like really amazing, really brilliant. Some of the morning radio shows, like City FM, like it's just like really brilliant what they're able to do in terms of accountability and just like following stories, following public spending, following accountability. That for me is some of like the best and the most interesting stuff that comes out of Ghana. And then, yeah, you know, like I said, a lot of freelancers are around also who produce content. But for the most part, the kind of journalism that the J School prepared us for to practice, yeah.
So,
the continent is not ready.
So, I mean, I have 2 questions just to follow up. So, I mean, you definitely moved back to Sierra Leone and maybe Ghana because of your roots there.
Yeah.
And you started off your own, call it, because Sweet Salon definitely grew out of something. I mean, so two things. The money was not it.
Mm-hmm.
The ethics. How do you balance up those two in looking for a job?
So Sweet Salon was sweetsalon.com was a news platform I started, like kind of blogging Sierra Leone back in 2005. And then over the years transitioned into like kind of, I would say, news from millennial Sierra Leoneans, both at home and in the diaspora. We cover primarily young entrepreneurs, startups, anybody who's like really excellent or breaking out. We also cover news. We cover the elections. Whenever it's like election time, I spend a lot of time and resources trying to make sure we can give like accurate reporting on the elections. And then day to day, just trying to stay abreast of what's going on in the diaspora, the arts, entertainment, just anything that really is about, like I said earlier, 75% of the population in Sierra Leone are young people. So for me, it's like, that's who I serve, that's who I work for. So it's about producing contents to educate them, to inform them, and also to celebrate them, because local content media and local journalists in Sierra Leone rarely tell stories about young people who are doing good or well in business or doing well in music, up and comers, fashion designers. You don't find those stories in our traditional media. So for me, I'm just like, listen, I want to talk about my generation and younger. So that's the kind of content we cover at sweetsalon.com. That is not a financial anything. We make zero revenue from that, like zero revenue. But so one of the things I learned really early on is that, like, yes, there may not be a lot of, journalism jobs on the continent, right? However, journalism skills and journalistic skill sets are very much in need. So you just have to kind of like change the work that you do and what the output is. And for me, that was like public relations, communications, and marketing. I'm using all of my Columbia Journalism School skill sets, but primarily I serve organizations, government agencies, development organizations, and private companies, corporations, fast-moving goods producers and manufacturers. They're the ones that I end up I tell their stories, I write their press releases, I do their copy editing, and produce content about business, and projects, and community impact stories and human interest stories. So everything is still like it's like journalistic training that drives it, but it's not journalistic work. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's how my company runs. We still do interviews, we still produce video stories and documentaries. We do documentary photography, but again, like I said, this is now commissioned work, right? Commissioned by private sector, commissioned by projects. Sometimes, I do government projects. I support government communications. Other times it's individuals. Other times it's development organizations. So I tell people, like, I'm a communications expert for hire. Wherever there's a story that needs to be told and a communication strategy that needs to be set up, people come to me and I help them kind of draft the messaging, get it right to make it impactful for the audiences that they want to reach.
So I think that is how. So you moved from Sweet Salon, well, not moving because it was just freelancing, writing stuff. I mean, just for your generation, maybe just for the fun of it. But then you moved over to VR&C Marketing, which is where you are currently.
Yeah. So Salon is now an asset of VR&C Marketing. So I rarely publish on it anymore, but I have a team in Sierra Leone who produce the content, who I've trained in storytelling, continuous training. In fact, we just launched a digital media training program back in September, where we have 6 interns who are graduates from the country, like the University of Sierra Leone's mass communications program. We have 2 young ladies there who have master's degrees, one in public policy, the other one an MBA, who are learning to basically do digital media and comms. So we're training, but I don't really do reporting on there anymore. Sweet Salon can't afford me anymore. You can't afford me. But my team every day still produce stories, and we're never going to stop producing stories, because I feel like whether it's 10 years or 20 years, that platform needs to exist, because we need to be telling Sierra Leonean stories, especially about young people. VR&C Marketing is my it's my company, and my company is, does Sweet Salon, produces the Vickie Remoe show, as well as providing all the comms and marketing support that we do regularly for clients. So like recently I did some work for the Open Society Initiative for West Africa, which is documentary work. They ran a project in the sub-region called Essential Stories, which was like all journalism, documenting stories of essential workers in Sierra Leone, how they were surviving through the pandemic. So that's what we did for about 6 months, producing those stories. We also produce, like we really are doing, we're producing media, right? Digital media, lots of content. I think of myself more as a multimedia content producer with a journalism background, or communications expert with a journalism background. Like everything is kind of like, it's a journalistic, journalism powers everything. I am a journalist. Like, you can't, once you are a journalist, it's like a doctor is always a doctor, a lawyer is always a lawyer, even if you're not practicing. The whole thing, the whole point of becoming a professional, right, for something to be a profession, is that your brain gets rewired, and the way you approach life, the way you approach content, the way you consume the news, your analytical reasoning, all of it is framed by that formation, your professional formation. And that's basically what journalism has done for me, which means, even in my personal relationships, sometimes it's very difficult to, I've been in relationships where my lovers have complained that, like, I don't let them win arguments. I'm like, oh, you don't really have like sources. Like, where are you getting this from? Like, what's the evidence? Like, who did you talk to? Like, like where's this coming? Like, is that a credible source? I don't think so. I think, and even so, it's one of those things where I'm just like, I'm sorry, I can't undo this. Like, I've got a question to ask you.
Right.
Like,
your whole life.
It's also why sometimes people think like I'm overly critical of the government in Sierra Leone, because so the way African governments work, as you know, oftentimes they say things, they just say things, right? So the president's office will say something like, okay, it's Youth Day. Let's just say, for example, it's like World Youth Day. The president's office will put out a statement that's like, my government is very supportive of youth in this country. We need all the youth in this country to be healthy and happy and have job opportunities. Happy International Youth Day. When I see things like that, I'm like, that's interesting, because what are the projects that you've done to support this state? Right. Where are the facts? How many jobs have you created? Where are they? Please bring the people. Can I get some sound bites? Where is the evidence? Correct. And so that people don't understand that that's just like, it's how my mind works. When you say something, the first thing I'm thinking is like, who are the sources? How can we substantiate this? And if you can't substantiate it, don't say it. Where's the evidence? And it might seem like antagonistic all the time, but that's what it means to be a journalist. It's just the lens through which we consume the world. It's one that it's about balance. It's about evidence. It's about sources. It's about, I don't want to say the truth, but it is about the truth. And it's also about transparency and accountability, that if somebody has said something, you want to see proof. You want them to show that if it is X, show us that it is X. And a lot of times, on the continent, our leaders, they will just say, we've built a hospital. We're going to do a ribbon cutting. Fine, there is a building. There is a sign that says hospital. Right. But when you enter it, it will not have medication, right? It will not have equipment. It will not have all the specialties of professionals that you need to work there, right? It may not even have electricity, but they will say they've opened a hospital. So it is a dangerous thing to be a journalist like me if you want to find it, when every time people are launching things, you're like, wait. A building, just because a building has a sign that says hospital, does not a hospital make. Can we first define what is hospital?
Correct. And I'm just glad you have not had any problems this far in Sierra Leone. I hope.
I mean, I get threats. I get lots of threats. I get lots of misogynistic vitriol and hate all the time, both from men and women. I get a lot of threats because one thing you have to understand, and I understand this, so in a way it doesn't really bother me. One thing you have to understand is that it's not even just that I'm a journalist, or it's not that I ask questions. It's also that I'm a woman, right? And it's not just that I'm a woman. It's that, like, I am an educated woman. It's not just that I'm an educated woman who's a journalist. I'm an educated woman who's a journalist who also has a platform. And I am very young.
Right.
And I am unmarried. And I am a single mother. And I'm also twerking whenever I want. So it's like people are like, hey, this guy, what? Please, somebody just shut her up.
Yeah, I think I followed up. I may not have the details. You had a problem with the female minister or somebody high ups there in Sierra Leone, and you guys were going back and forth on it, and she was like,
no, it wasn't. I didn't have a problem with the female minister, but there have been several instances where I've been vocal about female genital mutilation. And not everybody in Sierra, in the US, if I said, oh, female genital mutilation, rah, 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 we don't want that for children, I feel like nobody in the room is going to disagree or think that there's even a dissenting view, right? That you shouldn't cut off a girl's clitoris when she's a child. That's something that if I stand in New York City, nobody will be like, yes, the sky is blue. Is this an argument?
right.
But in Sierra Leone, it is an argument. It is up for debates. Not everybody agrees that we should not cut off the clitoris or the clitoral hood of girls and women. We're not in agreement. So when you say that in a country where this has been used before for political power and for all kinds of there's a whole hierarchy also, being a woman who's done the rites of passage and a woman who hasn't, there's a whole thing. So when you come and you're a Sierra Leonean woman and you're like, no, I'm sorry, that's not my story. And also I don't support that. I don't want that to continue. You're going to bump heads with a lot of people because you're going against the grain. So it was kind of that. And so I got a lot of heat. People were really upset and rah, 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 rah. But what? I'm like Tony Montana. I don't care. What?
Correct.
What? Seriously, I'm just give it 72 hours. We will move on to something else. So there is a lot of heat from time to time, but it's a price you pay for being vocal and being open and being out in the public. So for me, it comes with the territory. I don't take anything personal. I don't take applause personal, and I don't take booze or dissent person. I don't. I feel like who I am and what I represent, the most important person in all of that is me. And so if I can go to sleep at night, then I'm good. I ain't got no problems. You can curse me and insult me and whatever. My mother is on Facebook. My father is on Facebook. They're in WhatsApp groups. So they'll be sitting in their WhatsApp groups. People will be insulting their daughters. And I'm like, oh, mommy, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
My dad is in a WhatsApp group, a political WhatsApp group, and I am being insulted in the WhatsApp group. A bikini picture of me is posted in the WhatsApp group that my father is in. Hey, I was like, oh, Sierra Leoneans, you want to kill my father for me? But that's just, again, that comes with the territory of being
correct.
Young, female, professional, outspoken, and refusing to be quiet. Because I could be quiet. I could just mind my small something in the corner. Oh, I don't want. And that's what happens to a lot of women. I always tell people, like, I'm not the most brilliant woman from Sierra Leone. I'm not the most educated woman from Sierra Leone. I'm not the best activist from Sierra Leone. I'm not the best anything from Sierra Leone, right? There are women long before me who have tried to do all of the things that I've done. There are lots of women on whose shoulders I stand. So many of whom I know, and many of whom I know personally, right? But the difference is that I am not afraid, or I feel like the battle has to be fought out in front for everybody to see, right? That I'm not afraid of the challenge of this, like, you're gonna come at me and curse me and call me a whore and a prostitute, and my father is going to see it. I'm like, listen, is my the other people who they're insulting and calling prostitute, don't they also have fathers? Why
Correct.
is my father special that his daughter should not be insulted? Eh? Is he Jesus? No, my father should be insulted. That is equality. Why should my mother not worry for her daughter? Are other people's mothers not worried for their daughters? They are. Like, we're not like, let them endure what is their own portion. If they didn't want me to be this way, they should not have spent all this money to educate me and rah, 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 rah. So
Yeah.
I'm good. I'm good.
If you are just joining us, you are listening to Vickie Remoe. She's a multimedia journalist, communication specialist in Sierra Leone, and she's my classmate. I often have to stress that so that people know that I also have a classmate who is successful. But it's a good segue into the coronavirus or COVID-19, because like you just said, you had this, I mean, you have been going into different spaces, and it's not enough for people to just throw information around. And I'm sure because of your reporting, especially with respect to COVID-19, there's something that pricked your conscience or pricked your mind with specific reference to Sierra Leone. What was that experience, and how? I mean, I know it, but for the sake of the audience.
Sure. So I actually, in March, I went to Sierra Leone because, like I said, I do business in Sierra Leone. I live full time in Ghana, and I travel to and from Sierra Leone. When I have clients there, I have an office there now. I have staff in Sierra Leone. And so I'd gone to Sierra Leone in March to sign a contract with a new client. And I'd planned to be in town for 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks. But then when I got there, of course, the country, within 2 weeks of getting there, we reported our first case of COVID, and, airports shut down. And, and the government made announcements that it was going to, set up these treatment centers, et cetera, and it had done this and it had done that. And so, like most people, I guess I believed that, like, what they said, they were doing this and setting that up, that they had. I didn't question that they wouldn't, because it's like, it's a pandemic, right? And also we have the history of Ebola also. So you're like, oh, they must know what they're doing and they must have set things up. But then a month into it, I saw a Facebook post that a doctor at the largest hospital in the country did, which was to say that if people wanted to know what was going on, they should, like, come down to the hospital and find out, because they don't have the basic things they need to do their work for COVID. And I was like, really? I thought, anyway, so I messaged him privately, and I went there, and I went to what had been set up as the not a treatment center, but like what was it called? It's basically a place where they kept suspected cases, and then you would be transferred to a treatment center. So I went there, and they had 13 rooms, and they only had one thermometer for those 13 rooms. And it was a thermometer that was being used from the main hospital to this infectious disease unit. And the way COVID is that if you have suspected cases, which is that, so people are all in this one place, they're suspected cases, meaning some people will be COVID positive and some people will not be. And so it was like, okay, if you're going to have suspected cases, some will be negative and some will be positive, you actually need a completely different set for, like, their vitals, so that you're not mixing this person is positive. By the time you know they're positive, you've already infected somebody else because you're using the same tool. And this facility didn't have any tools. They didn't even have tools for their triage section. And I was like, this is crazy. And the other thing that really struck me is that the two doctors who I met there, they are our age. One of them is even younger than me. He was 32. And I was like, the head of the infectious unit is 32. Like in my mind, I'm like, you have to protect these people. They can't get COVID, right? Because this is a young person. We have to protect our young people. Like it's so important, especially those who are, already at the top providing any kind of service. I was just like, oh my God, if these people get COVID, what are we going to do? Because they get COVID, they're down for 3. Who's going to do this work? So I came home and I just, I kind of got into how I really deal with any kind of problems is that like, okay, this is the problem. What can I do? And I started making calls. Like, okay, I told them, let me see what I can do. I started calling people like, hey, this is the situation at the hospital. I need to raise funds to buy equipment. And I just called like my contacts. And within 4 days, I had raised like everything. In fact, one person I contacted was like, okay, we'll just buy all the equipment they need for that particular facility, which they did. And then I had raised an additional $11,000 to that. And I was just like, okay, well, now we have this extra money. I'm sure there's more need. And so I decided to then launch like a larger fundraiser around emergency response. And sure and heck, like as soon as we said there's more need, I created a WhatsApp group with the 2 doctors that I had worked with initially and asked them, well, if you know of any other doctors who are running facilities that might need help, let them know that we're here to help. Within like 48 hours, we had all these other doctors in this WhatsApp group, and everybody was saying that, yes, they had set up a treatment center, treatment facility, but no, they did not have tools. They did not have what they needed. And I was like, well, let's see what we can do. And, the other good thing is being a journalist really, really helped because I was able to use my storytelling skills to amplify what was going on at these facilities, to talk about the frontline workers and the sacrifices that were being made, and to just like let the communities know that like whatever you've heard about how things are, it really is not accurate, that like we are in a desperate situation and we need to take action. In 2 months, we were able to raise $60,000. And we were, of that $60,000, we spent about 40 something thousand on equipment and medication, nasal prongs, all kinds of things to just make it easier for frontliners to work. The key thing was equipment because, for COVID, you need an oximeter, which is how you measure the amount of oxygen in someone's blood. Without that, you can't really treat anybody. And a lot of the hospitals did not have any. For many hospitals in the countries, what we provided was the first oximeter they received, period. The thermometer, like everything we provided, we were faster to deliver goods and supplies to hospitals than the national government was. Because they have bureaucracy, they have this, they have that. We just created a system and process for requests, validating those requests, doing the sourcing and purchasing, and then making those deliveries. So and I'm like, this is an emergency. It's not time for like but we were still able to keep account of every single dime that we spent and create a public reporting system where every week we would update the public. There's an open Google Drive that had all of our like weekly reports. We still have about $16,000 of those funds that we haven't spent. That's still unspent, and we wanted to do a legacy project. So we decided with a bunch of other people, we're setting up a scholarship fund for medical students in Sierra Leone, and we're still kind of trying to figure out the paperwork. We've done some signing, appointed people to the board of directors, and so that's like the next steps. We're hoping to roll that out in the next year. And then every year, as a personal commitment, I will do fundraisers to raise funds for the scholarship fund. And everybody who's on the board of directors is also committed to do the same, because we really believe that to stop the brain drain of medical expertise from Sierra Leone, it starts at the College of Medicine. We have to make sure that, we turn doctors into advocates for patients, and we also give them the support they need so that they don't want to leave Sierra Leone to go practice elsewhere. I'll just give you like a quick statistic. Like Sierra Leone sends, to educate a medical doctor in the UK, it's about 250,000 pounds. Sierra Leone has a third of every doctor that has been trained in Sierra Leone is not practicing in Sierra Leone. And you look at how much we send, I feel like I saw this somewhere, it's like either like 12 million, if you count all the people that are educated in Sierra Leone, doctors and nurses that are practicing in the UK in their own national healthcare system, it's like we're sending them 12 million pounds of aid every year. Like medical aid with our expertise, because these are doctors and nurses that are trained in Sierra Leone and they go work in the NHS. So if you count how much they would have spent to train them, every year we're giving them 12 million pounds.
That's an interesting fact that we are sending aid, and I like the way you put it.
Yeah, medical aid. We're giving them medical aid in every year.
I'm not sure those guys will be happy with you. Yes.
And these are the same people who are cutting. They've just announced that they are cutting their development aid. I hope they will remember that they have our money in the healthcare system. They're cutting. So it's true. It's true. So for me, it's that, like, you know, my approach, my life approach period is that if there is a problem, if I can do something to alleviate, find a solution to make it better, I'm going to do it. It's just how I am.
So Vickie, thank you very much. And I really want to appreciate, this is an example of, a citizen who is taking responsibility beyond just exposing a problem, also looking for a solution, and not looking for a solution and wanting the government to solve it, taking it right down and I'm sure you saved thousands of lives just with that. A hospital having one thermometer for how many people? And beyond that, some other person would have already spent the $16,000 in terms of miscellaneous. Right.
Let me tell you something. About me. I tell this is something my father told me a long time ago. There are names in our country that are very common names. So, most people in Sierra Leone, their last name is Kamara, Koroma, Toure, Conte, Mansare. These are very, standard Sierra Leone last names. There is no other person in Sierra Leone with the last name Remoe. No other family has our last name. So I do not have, my father says, we don't have anonymity of name, meaning that just know if you do something to embarrass yourself, we will know who it is. So I will never collect money from public good that is from the public for public good and use it. I will never, because this is my name. I don't want someone to carry my name, Vickie Remoe. It's not like they will say which Vickie Remoe. There's only one.
Right.
So no. And also just because, come on, it's a, it's public trust. It's not my money. It is not my money. It's not my money. This is the people's money. People donated money, hard-earned money during a pandemic to support our healthcare system, to support other citizens. And it would be a gross violation of public trust. It would be sinful for me or anyone else to use money that is for our people and go buy, what am I going to even use? Dress? Why? Please.
I'm going to come to the fashion slayer you have become, because I've been following that up too. But it's interesting. Let's just focus on COVID for a moment, because again, like you and I had when we're talking off camera, very many people are focused on the fact that COVID or Africa missed COVID. I don't know who missed who. Maybe COVID missed Africa in a certain sense, because there was the projections that people had was it was going to be really hard on Africa. And what the scenario you presented is clear. If a hospital or a center that was supposed to be taking care of you had just one thermometer, if this thing really hit, it would have been bad. But beyond that story, which is a good story in itself, and there's a lot to unpack. There's something else that you mentioned, which is where we should be focusing, the fallouts. I'd like you to expatiate on that.
So currently I'm working as a communications manager for the COVID-19 Action Fund for Africa, which is a $100 million fund that's being raised to provide personal protective equipment, PPE, for community health workers in 20 African countries. To date, the coalition has delivered over 50 million pieces of PPE to 12 countries, and we've just started the second phase of like procurements to deliver to additional countries. Now, as part of this work, I've spent a lot of time talking to people who are doing public health and emergency healthcare work right now within the context of this pandemic. And the reality is this, that yes, COVID-19, the coronavirus, has not had we've not had the mass hospitalizations that we've seen in Europe and in America and elsewhere. We've not had the high death rates that we've seen in Europe and America and elsewhere. However, most African countries have fragile or weak healthcare systems, like Sierra Leone. What does that mean? It means that in a pandemic like this, your routine healthcare services are what suffers because all the attention and resources have now been placed towards the pandemic response, right? So, for example, key things to look at: immunizations. Most people in Africa, their way to access healthcare is not government hospitals, it's community healthcare workers who go door to door and give them like immunizations, give them information about reproductive health, help pregnant mothers, access care, treats malaria, give them ORS for diarrhea. These are the services that community healthcare workers provide on a daily basis, both in last mile communities that are far away, in our villages that are very remote, and within cities where you have slum communities. Community healthcare workers are that cadre of healthcare workers that are mostly volunteer, not very trained and skilled, but they connect millions of people. 1 million community healthcare workers in Africa provide services to 400 million African citizens. They are like the first line of defense, right? So what you've had across the continent is that because so many countries, even our national responses were focused on the pandemic behaving in Africa as it did elsewhere, they invested a lot in these COVID-19 treatment centers, in ventilators and, central government activities. And they sidelined or forgot about community healthcare. So what's happened, for example, in Mali, I was talking to a representative from an NGO that works in Mali called Muso, and he said that in Segu, which is in central Mali, because the community healthcare workers did not have PPE, things that have happened that are like just really terrible for the community are that maternal mortality has gone up about 8 times higher in the pandemic, because usually they do active case finding where community health workers will go door to door in communities. Community healthcare workers on average serve about 150 to 200 households. That's about 1,500 to 1,700 people is who 1 or 2 healthcare workers would be helping. So imagine that woman or that man who usually comes into the community that will know who's pregnant, that will know who needs this, who's sick, whose child has malaria, treat them, can't do that now because they don't have PPE. Or what you find is like in Malawi, people having to walk really, really far, because a lot of community health services also are done on what you'd call healthcare days, right? So they'll say Thursdays, bring all the children for immunizations, or this day, come for maternal health services. So people who live very, very far away, they know these days already, right? So you'll now walk a very long distance to come and get care. And because there's COVID, some facilities are closed, there's no PPE. So you find those people then never get the care, right? The immunizations don't happen and people go back home, and you have a break in services again. And those things that we usually deal with in Africa, cholera, diarrhea, infant mortality, maternal mortality, just adolescent reproductive healthcare, all of that then suffers. So while we can say, yes, COVID-19 has not killed Africans, has not devastated healthcare systems in the way that we expected it to, it is having a devastating effect on community health, on maternal health, especially. Maternal mortality has gone up 20% during the pandemic on the continent, according to the UN. And so this is something that we really have to be careful before we celebrate, because we might have, blind spots, really bad things happening in our communities with regards to healthcare that are not COVID related, but that are part of like the pandemic fallout.
So, Vickie, again, I'd like for you to, spend some time, maybe a couple of minutes, just talking about the CAF Africa. And for those who are watching, you may want to find out more. It's cafafrica.org. Give us the details of it. And I'm sure if you run an organization, you want to donate, you want to help, because it's $100 million fund. Let Vickie take it.
Sure. So the COVID-19 Action Fund for Africa, CAF Africa, is a coalition of about 30 public health and global health organizations, which includes Last Mile Health, Pandemic Action Network, Direct Relief, Community Health Impact Coalition, the Clinton Health Access Initiative, and many other partners who've come together to say, okay, we know that, first of all, universal healthcare is the goal and it's the aim. We also know that the best and easiest way to give universal healthcare in Africa is through strengthening community healthcare systems. And we know that during this pandemic, what is going to happen is that governments are going to forget about community health. And that's exactly what happened. So they formed this coalition in August. And since then, they've been working to mobilize private and philanthropic resources to fund the delivery of PPE. And they work with governments as well, because as you would know, you won't know. How are you going to know how much PPE to send to Sierra Leone? How will you know how much PPE to send to Malawi? So part of the work that the fund has also done has been to work with local health NGOs, local partners, and ministries of health to quantify the need, right? To quantify and aggregate the need, how much PPE is needed over time, 3 months, 6 months, a year, in each of these countries, and then doing like kind of pooled buying. So you're like, okay, instead of buying for Sierra Leone by itself, Liberia by itself, Cote d'Ivoire by itself, we can then now use our resources to get the best price, because you're now buying bulk, right? So you're going to buy millions and then deliver it to multiple different countries. So that's what the COVID-19 Action Fund for Africa has been doing. And like I said, yeah. Sorry?
No, I didn't say anything.
Okay. And so that's the work that they've been doing, and it's really great work. I mean, for me, it's that like, yeah, I was in Sierra Leone doing my own COVID-19 dignity fund, and so then this opportunity came up to work to basically do what I was doing for just Sierra Leone in terms of storytelling and documentary and comms on now continent level, and so it was just like a really amazing transition, to do something, volunteer to do it, and now get to a point where like someone's paying you to do the same work, but that is more impactful across the continent.
So again, ladies and gentlemen, if you are listening and you really want to support work that is directly related to COVID-19 on the continent, and Vickie has really highlighted the role of community healthcare workers. Very often people forget about those people at the basic level who are doing the actual work. You can get onto this site, cafafrica.org, and there's a lot of literature on it. I've been reading quite some good stuff about it. So let's also support the work. Now, Vickie, let's have a couple of more minutes before you go. Now, in what I find amazing about you is you are doing so many things, but at the same time, you find time for fun. Because I think that the one thing I've seen recently is like the what you have on. You are promoting African design, and I went to your Instagram page.
What do I have to say? Like, I really commit to living life fully, and I also feel, there was a time when we thought that, oh, if you're if you're the MD of a company, if you're a CEO of a company, you should have to be very serious. You have to be very corporate because that is what an MD does. If you are an entrepreneur, if you're a journalist, you have to be very this because this is what you're. I don't really buy into any of that. I feel like life is really short. And I happen to be very, very talented. I'm like a multidisciplinary kind of person. I think of myself first as a creative than anything else. And so I do creative storytelling, I do creative video production, and I also do, I'm interested in fashion and textiles and artisanal creations from Africa because, again, it ties back to this idea that we have a lot of things on the continent that are great, that are amazing, and we need to like continue to create like global demand for them. That's how you create jobs, that's how you create more employment, and that's how you keep wealth in Africa. If I and I'm This is not like a judgment on everybody, but this is what it is. It's like ultimately, if I am intentional about buying African goods and wearing African clothes and working with African designers, I am keeping my money on the continent. I'm supporting African fashion designers and the tailors that make the clothes. I'm supporting a whole supply chain of people who are in Africa, right? And so I'm a big advocate for that in every single way. And so, yeah, it's what I'm about. I'll give you like a prime example. So this is a fanny pack, okay, that I had made. The fabric, I had a friend who lived in Mali and I called him. I'm like, can you please buy Mbogolan Fini for me? And they said, sure. So I bought, this is modcloth that comes from Mali. I bought the fabric in Mali and had DHL'd it from Mali to Ghana. Then I took the fabric to a lady who makes accessories in Medina markets here in Accra. And I'm like, oh, I want to have a fanny pack made. So she made this for me, right? And for me, I'm like, yeah, this is how you keep wealth in Africa, right? Like, it's about trying to find ways to add value to African things that are like artisanal African products so that we can like then create, demand for these things, because who wouldn't want to wear this fanny pack? It's so cute. All right, this one is also a fanny pack that I had made. So the textile is manufactured here in Ghana by a company called Printex that I've worked for years. And so I took the textile, took it to the lady who makes the bags. I'm like, can you make me a fanny pack like this? And she said, yeah. And then I can sell this on Etsy, right? So I created the product, and then I will use my creative photography skills and copywriting, and I will sell this and retail it online to people all over the world. I've sold items on my e-commerce store to people from everywhere, and you keep that going, so that lady in Medina markets will get more orders of it. Do you understand what I mean? So that's what needs to happen with how we consume, because we're very, very consumerist on the continent, but a lot of what we consume is are things that take our money out of our continent, and we need to start, being more intentional about how we spend. And so for me, my clothes, I don't really buy clothes anymore. All of my clothes are custom made by fashion designers and tailors on the continent.
And if you want to see more, you can go to Vickie's Instagram.
Yes, go to my Instagram. Yes.
You can get there and you see a lot of it. I was trying to pull that up. But for the remainder of the time we have Vickie, I have two more, and because I think Mohammed Ademo, our classmate, also went back to the continent. The last I checked, he's supposed to be in Ethiopia, but
he's back home in the US now.
Okay, so but I'm looking at it in terms of COVID has come up with everybody. You need to reimagine, and I'm asking, you went back to the continent and you've been very successful. 8 years, I've seen a lot of things that you have done. What advice would you give to graduates like us who have been stuck in the US, or for people who leave Ivy League school and just think that because you have left an Ivy League school, therefore you should be brandishing that? What advice do you have for people like us who maybe have not been able to take the risk?
Yeah, it's a difficult one, because I think that home isn't always ready for us when we come back. And, people have all kinds of different situations. So I like to talk about this from a position of empathy and say that I feel like not everybody will come back and not everybody needs to come back because it is not in their best interest. I would like to say, like, yeah, everybody should come back and it's great, just come back home, da, da. But home isn't always receptive. Home doesn't always have the same values that you want it to have. Home may not have the same support system and support structures. Home may not have the same facilities that you need to thrive. And we all have to kind of like take stock of that and like, what do you need? And is that possible at home for you to not just like make money, but also to thrive? I'm lucky in the sense that I think because in my mind, I always knew that I was coming back home. The decisions that I made and the way that I engage with the US and the way that I engage with home has always been forward thinking for a life that was going to be in Africa. And also, when I did get here to look for opportunities, while, I didn't go and tell people that I mean, like, yeah, if people ask, I'd talk about it, but I rarely talk about the fact that I have an Ivy League degree. Because that's not what keeps the bills paid. What's important is that you can deliver what you say you're going to deliver, being impeccable with your word, and also understanding the markets that you are in and being able to pivot to the opportunities that exist there. So for me, it's always been okay, I'm a journalist. That's what I'm trained to do. But can I sustain myself on journalism? No. Okay, well, what is there? What opportunities exist within this market that I can use the same skill sets, the same tools to then be able to add value and make an impact while sustaining myself? And so that's been my approach, and it's really worked. It's really worked for me. My first job that I went to look for was at a TV station. When I came out of grad school, I came to Ghana and I went to Metro TV to look for a gig as a producer, and they were like, "No, we don't hire producers. What do you mean?" And but I went there to have a conversation. It was really like a cold call. And when I was able to meet like the deputy director of the TV station. And because I brought my CV, I guess, and I was just like super professional, he looked at it and a week later he called and he was like, I don't have anything for you to do, but I have a friend who I was just talking to, and they were asking me if I knew anyone who was like creative, had some fashion experience. And, I feel like you might be the kind of person, so I will introduce you. And that's how I got my first opportunity in Ghana. He took me to meet the owner of a textile company, Printex, which I just mentioned. And that person said, oh, we're just looking for someone who can support some creative work around, our fashion textile. Is that something that you could do? And I was like, they were offering $500 a month. And I was like, my student loans my student loans are actually more than that a month. However, my approach is that I'd never worked for a manufacturing company before and I didn't have any experience. And I was just like, well, it's not going to pay my bills, but since it's just consulting and I don't have to wake up to come here every day, maybe I can just use it as a learning opportunity until something better comes along. And I just did that and I did it well. And I was able to like, after like 2 months, he was just like, I made a proposal like, okay, based on what I've observed, this is what you guys need to do. And he was like, well, I don't have anyone on staff to do that. Is this something you could deliver? I was like, sure. And he was like, how much, can we pay you? And I said what I needed. I need this and this and this. And he was like, sure, I'll give you all of that. And, I was able to like make really, really, really good money working for them. But it all started with something that was not anything I could survive on, but I took it because, I needed the work and I also wanted to learn. And I didn't think that having a Columbia degree meant that I couldn't learn anything more. And that's really my approach in general. It's just that like, I don't really think that, I think education is really, really important. But skills are way more important. And I've been living the kind of life where I'm constantly trying to like upskill and learn new skills. So if I want to pivot into comms, I'm going to go learn some new comms skills. If I want to pivot into PR, I'm going to learn some new comms skills. If I want to pivot into digital marketing, I'm going to go learn those skills. And that's kind of what's really helped me, that I've stayed like a step ahead of where the market was and making sure like I'm acquiring the skills as I to make sure I grow, right? And continue to be marketable here.
That's super, 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 super helpful. Staying ahead on the skill side, and I think that's great because I think that just answers the question I was going to ask you for young people on the continent who want to study journalism, whether that's something you want to encourage them to do based on, that smirk already tells me.
No, it's like you really have to. It's not about so much. It's like it really it depends on the market you're in, right? It depends on the market you're in and the individual drive because journalism, you're only as hot as your last story, right? Like so. As a journalist, there's no laurels to rest on. Like there's not. It's a constantly on the go. You have to always be producing content. Like always be producing content, and you always have to be out there. What's the next story? And I don't know if a lot of people have that same kind of bite and hunger or even understand what that requires for me to say, yeah, go be a journalist. So no, I don't know if I can give advice on that at all because I feel like it really is in a way a calling. And if you don't have that calling, you can go learn how to become a journalist, but you will never really be a journalist.
Right. So, last thing, because I know it's your passion, you talk a lot about women all the time. I mean, I've not followed for a while now. On Facebook, you always came up, and there's something you always say. What is the challenge? I mean, that's kind of a rough way to put it. But as a young girl, you reference part of it, the young professional woman on the continent. You know,
Mhm.
what is it? Some of the challenges that you have had to overcome, and just because you're a journalist has given you some great, many people don't have that.
Yeah, I think that for all young women on the continent, the key thing is that really the workplace isn't, and like corporates, everything, it's not really designed to support young women's success or for young women to thrive. That's just a fact. And so you have to learn how to very quickly navigate a system that wasn't designed for your success, that wasn't designed for you. That's just offices aren't designed for African women. Offices aren't like business meetings and business this and business that opportunities, the conferences, the government offices, they're not designed to be favorable for African women. So young African women, especially, they're very hostile, actually.
Mm.
Everywhere is very hostile. And so some of the challenges have just been like, yeah, I felt not welcome in the sense that, like, as a young woman, you're not welcome in decision making, and you're not welcome at the table, and you're not welcome where there's power. You're not welcome where there's a wealth unless it's like you're accessing it through a man. And I've constantly kind of rejected that idea and that path, that that's the only way I'm going to access power. So it means a lot of work. It also means a lot of getting out of spaces and saying no to situations where you know that they're not really offering you power, but they're offering you power through them. And that's something you have to learn, that you do have the power to say no. And I've said no to a lot of things that if I had said yes, I'd be probably far advanced right now. But I really always believed in my capacity to just be excellent and to grow, to build my own thing. And so that's really what I do. I'm just like, you know what, it's probably going to be harder, it's probably going to be a longer road, but I really believe in my abilities, and I know that I can, and I will, and I do. And so I've done it, and I'm going to keep doing it.
Wow, really great. I'm sure. I mean, just looking at the progress you have made, I'm very inspired by it, and I really want to say thank you. But before that, let me encourage everybody. So one last thing. It would be nice to follow Vickie. Go on her Twitter handle at Vickie Remoe. That's it. And then find out her VR&C marketing. You can also read, like I just said, if you really want to get updated information, go on to cavafrica.org.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, Vickie, I don't want to keep you any longer than you would love to be. Any last word?
No, I just wanted to say thank you for having me on. It's really been a pleasure to catch up with you. It's been so long. I'm just glad that you're still, doing what you can to kind of tell stories with like an African diaspora focus. So thank you so much. And like, yeah, and thank you to the audience for listening and tuning in. It's always such a pleasure to share my story because as when you're a comms person, you're a journalist, people are like, you're not the story. So it's like you might have a great story, but you're not the story. So your story is like last.
Yeah, but I think in this context, you actually, and that's the reason why I insisted on having you on Thanksgiving Day, because I really think that is a story worth telling. Because again, there are many things we have spoken a lot about different aspects here. Just that journey of going back to Africa from school in the United States, even though you have the opportunity to be in the United States, it's not as if somebody bundled you back. You are a green card holder. You could stay here, look for a job and do things, but then you decided to take the challenge to go back to Africa to tell the African story from the African perspective. And you have been, I followed up your work in Sierra Leone and Ghana, and I think it's a great story to continue to tell. I was the part of COVID-19, that work that you did in Sierra Leone and what you are doing now with CAF Africa is an important contribution. I really want to say thank you, and I'm sure you and I are going to be in touch. We'll continue to do the great work. And hey, whenever you come to, I know Vickie comes back to the United States quite often. She just
before COVID. Now we're like, geez,
right,
so bad.
right. And again, the one thing I really want to, because I know that many people are not on today, but one thing I really want to encourage people, especially, there is a foundation called the Kua Foundation. It's a women's foundation that was founded by a Cameroonian who lives here. I really want her to be able to get in touch with you because, again, she has a platform where there are people who mentor young women on the continent. And I believe that you are going to be a great mentor for many young women. And I think beyond that, the foundation should be able to do something. Again, I'm waiting for you whenever you come in. The last time I met you when you came to Georgetown, but we'll catch up.
I know. We have to catch up. Next time I'm in, definitely we'll link up.
Right. So thank you again. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure talking to Vickie Remoe. And like I said, check her out, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and the most important, get to her business page, VR&C Marketing. That's where you really want to catch her on. And if there are any things you really want to reach her, you can always reach out to me. Thank you again. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Bye. Thank you, Lambert.